So in this video, we're going to take a look at columns and using columns. So although containers and rows prepares the content for layout, to take full advantage of this 12-column grid, which is what Bootstrap is all about, you have to kind of master how to write these columns, how to set up to your workspace so that you're getting the design and layout that you want to get. So columns start with a 12-column grid. Columns can span. Your columns have breakpoints. BP for this, for your little cheat sheet and all, is breakpoints. So you would write this as, hyphen BP, whatever your breakpoint is, which is, say, small, or MD for medium, or LG for large, and so on. And then it gets into, how many columns, you want. So you can write it several different ways. So example here is COL for column hyphen small, which would mean that the breakpoint then would be at 576 pixels. You can just specify that a section of content be a class of column, like, COL. That will make it a column, and what Bootstrap will do then is to fit that column into the layout. And if you have more than one column, it will just sort of automatically size them to fit that space. So if you have two columns, it will make them 50% of the size. 3 columns is going to be about 33%, and so on and so forth. Now you can also specify a breakpoint at which the column will convert. So if you say something like COL-SM, then what will happen is the column would normally take up the whole width of the browser until it reaches that small breakpoint of 576 or higher, until it reaches the next breaking point, which is 768. So of course, if you say something like that the column will continue to take up the full width of the browser until the median breakpoint, then how you would specify that is, again, putting in this MD then, as opposed to just the breakpoint for the small. Sorry, I flipped there and I didn't mean to. So anyway, you would have SM for small 576, and then if you wanted to force it to break at the medium range there, then you would have to put that in. So for example, for this one, you would be doing, example is COL hyphen MD, not SM, and then hyphen 6. So you're telling it exactly at what point you want it to break. Now I've opened up here and defined as my root folder. This is 0303. So lesson 0303, get that opened up. And then there are a bunch of what we have in here, 1 pixel wide PNG images. So there's all these just 1 pixel wide. They're just these gray images that we have in here to use. So right now, if you look at the style sheet that's controlling this, it's style. The image width is 100%, and your height is 200 pixels for each image, and the maximum height is 200 pixels for each image. That's the style sheet that's controlling that. So let's just go to the div that has the ID equals services right here. If you scroll down just a little bit, I have it on line 21. And we're going to change this. Instead of saying just ID equals services, we're going to give it a class of container. So you can see how that will affect this. So I'm going to type in here class equals container. With an ID equals services. Now you see that when I show this here in live view, that now instead of it being wide like it was covering the entire browser window, it is now contained within that specific container. This class equals container is very specific measurements. So you can look that up in here in your Bootstrap CSS to see exactly what that is. but it's exact measurements. And so thus why, when we did that and put the container in here, now it's held within this. So this gives our main container the rows and columns for this entire website. And it's now fitting inside of these three main breakpoints as you open and close the window. So as I open and close this, you'll see that as I get smaller and smaller and smaller, that the windows get smaller and smaller and smaller as I go down. And you'll see the text, how that scrunches up there, and the images are scrunching up to fit inside of that window. And as I expand it, then all the text expands along with that. So we want the entire thing to fit in just one row. So underneath this div with class of container, we're going to add div class equals row. So going back up here, right after it says ID services, I'm going to go in here right before section. I'm going to type in here, left caret div class equals, in quotes, row, right caret. So next we're going to add in, so now that we have that, we'll go ahead and add in some columns. So we got a row in here, and now what we want to do is add in one of the sections. We'll give it class equals COL for column. This will then try and scrunch up all the sections, all 12 sections, to fit inside of one row. So if we type that in here, so let me, so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but let's go ahead and just add the class equals column. So we'll do your section. Class equals column. And now you see what happens is by putting this in just this one section, class equals column here, then you have this particular section, this particular information all scrunched up into this area here, because this is now one column. And this is now another column over here, or it's taking up, looking like it's another column. All right, so moving on here, I'm just stopping here so you guys can kind of like look at that and see that. Let's go ahead and do a section, class equals column, for the grooming and see what happens there. So we'll go ahead and find our grooming here. And then once again, after section, we'll give this a class equals column. All right, so as you can see here, then this is 12 column grid, but we only put 2 of the sections into a 12 column grid. So as a result, only these 2 are resized to fit into that 12 column grid. Let's go ahead and put all of the sections. I had typed in a little bit here, gotten ahead of myself. So I'm going to go ahead and take that OL out. And then we'll go ahead and put in all of these into columns. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that and put a class equals, and then in quotes, column. Now you'll see that all of these are going to jump into that 12 column grid. There's only 6 sections, so they're still going to take up that 12-column grid. Each one of these being 2 columns in that grid. All right, let's look at then saying that, well, we don't want them to be specifically just fitting into this 12-column grid, but we want to kind of define the size that those are going to be. So right after column, I'm going to put a hyphen, and then go ahead for each one of these sections. I'm going to put a hyphen, and then go ahead and do -6 to define it as it taking up 6 columns in that 12-column grid in order to expand each one of these windows so that they're a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to type in here -6. And now you'll see that each one of these is going to take up 6 columns for each one, giving it that default space right here of that 15 pixels, and fill that space of that 12-column grid. So keep in mind that this works off of a 12-column grid. So if you're putting 6 in here for each one of these sections, then they're going to take up 6 columns within that 12-column grid. If you put a 4, well, they take up 4 columns within the 12-column grid. You can go in and you can change each one of these to be different. So one could be 2 columns, and one could be 4 columns, and one could be 8 columns, or whatever. So whatever number you have in here, that is what that is going to be taking up within that 12-column grid. Now you can also specify a breakpoint at which all of the columns will start taking up a certain amount of room. That's where the SM, so your small, medium, large, so LG and XL come in. Let's go ahead and all of these class styles here, after the column, instead of saying 6, let's go in and put in here a small SM. So I'm going to click inside of each one of these again to kind of speed it up. And I'm going to go ahead and put in, delete that 6, and put in SM instead of 6. So I'm deleting the 6 and putting in SM for all of these. And then I'm clicking down here, and you'll see once again that these are going to take up that 12-column grid. Now, as I collapse this, at what point does it end up into 1 column? Well, SM, small, is 576. So this is going to stay 12-column grid, 12-column grid, 12-column grid, all the way along here till I get to that breakpoint of 576. That's where the SM comes in. If you need other breakpoints, so you need a medium, you need, it to be 6, and then when it gets to small, then it collapses. Well, let's take a look at something like that. So again, the small are your breakpoints. SM is your breakpoints. And so that's what you want to do, is just kind of put in whatever those breakpoints are, whatever you want, however you want to lay this out. This is what you need to understand about Bootstrap. Until you get this, then you aren't going to be able to do very clean, very professional looking layouts. So I'm, putting my cursor in each of these. I'm going to go ahead and do another hyphen. I'm going to say 6. So in other words, I want each of these to be 6. And as I look at close up my window here and look at what's happening, you see that it stays within that 666. And then when I get to my 576, once again, it jumps to that small layout. So then each one is in a column down here. You can scroll down, you can see each one's in a column. Once again, as I open this up, then each one is going to continue to be 6 columns, and that's based on the size of the browser window. So if the browser window is really wide like this is going to be the appearance of those images, or and the text, and how the text wraps and fits in here. Again, it's going to continue to be 6, 6, 6, and 6 as you go down until you get to that 576, which is the small break point. And then it turns into a single column, because you've told it that up here. You've told it that it's going to be 6 width, so a 6 column width for every single one of those sections until you get to the small break point. Then it'll be single. All right, the next thing we're going to do is multiple column classes. So I'm going to end this recording